In 1962, when the civil rights movement was tearing America apart at its seams, and Harlem stood as a fortress of black dignity in a nation built on hatred, a man named Thomas "Tommy" Brennan made a decision that would seal his fate. He was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, a true believer in white supremacy, and he thought the shadows of his hood gave him immunity from consequences. He thought violence was his birthright, that terror was his tool, and that a pregnant black woman was an acceptable target for his rage. He had no idea he was about to face the legend of Harlem himself. Tommy Brennan believed he was untouchable because he wasn't operating in the Deep South where the Klan ruled openly. He was in New York, where the Klan existed in secret. Policemen, firemen, union officials, businessmen who wore their suits during the day and their hoods at night. They met in basements in Queens, in warehouses in Staten Island, in places where they could plot their hatred away from the eyes of a city that pretended to be progressive while allowing poison to fester in its heart. But New York wasn't Alabama, and Harlem wasn't a town where the Klan could operate with impunity. Because Harlem had something the South didn't have. It had Bumpy Johnson. And Bumpy Johnson had a code that transcended race, politics, or ideology. That code said, you don't hurt innocent people, you don't terrorize women, and you damn sure don't attack a pregnant woman and think you'll walk away unpunished. This is the story of what happened when the Ku Klux Klan brought their Southern terror to Northern streets. Of how they attacked Sarah Mitchell, a 24-year-old schoolteacher who was 7 months pregnant, simply because she dared to exist. Of how Tommy Brennan and his brothers in hatred learned that some places have their own form of justice, administered by men who don't wear badges but enforce consequences just as surely as any court. And why, 62 years later, former Klan members in New York still tell their grandchildren about the price they paid when they crossed a line that should never be crossed. The day they learned that Bumpy Johnson protected Harlem like a shepherd protects his flock, and that wolves who attacked the innocent would pay not just with money, but with their entire future. What happened next wasn't just justice, it was obliteration. It was the complete dismantling of a hate organization through financial warfare, legal precision, and the kind of strategic brilliance that made Bumpy Johnson a legend. Thomas Brennan was a second-generation Irish-American who'd grown up in Woodside, Queens, in a household where hatred was passed down like silverware. His father had been a Klan member in the 1920s during the organization's northern expansion, when they targeted not just Black Americans, but Catholics, Jews, and immigrants. Tommy had inherited that hatred the way some sons inherit businesses or trades. By 1962, at 38 years old, Tommy was a supervisor at Con Edison, the power company that supplied electricity to New York City. He made good money, $12,000 a year, enough to own a modest house in Queens, support a wife and 2 children, and maintain the appearance of respectability. He coached Little League on weekends. He attended church on Sundays. His neighbors thought he was a decent man, a little gruff maybe, but solid, reliable, the kind of guy you'd ask to help move furniture or jumpstart your car. But Thursday nights, Tommy Brennan became someone else entirely. Every Thursday at 8 p.m., he'd tell his wife he was going to his civic association meeting, which was technically true if you considered the Ku Klux Klan a civic association. He'd drive to a warehouse in Long Island City where Chapter 47 of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan held their meetings. 23 members strong, they were a cell of middle-class white men. Electricians, plumbers, police officers, small business owners, who believed their race was under attack and that violence was the appropriate response. Their leader was a man named Walter Kozlowski, a former Marine who ran a plumbing supply company in Brooklyn. He'd brought military discipline to their hatred, teaching them to operate in cells, to compartmentalize information, to strike quickly and disappear before anyone could respond. Under his leadership, Chapter 47 had committed dozens of acts of terror over the past 3 years. Cross burnings in black neighborhoods in Queens, vandalism of synagogues, beatings of interracial couples, fire bombings of civil rights organization offices. They'd never been caught. Not once, because they were careful, organized, and protected by members who worked in law enforcement and could make evidence disappear or investigations stall. Tommy Brennan was Kozlowski's right-hand man, his enforcer, the one who got things done. He'd participated in at least 15 violent attacks since joining the Klan in 1959. He'd beaten a Jewish shopkeeper unconscious in Flushing. He'd firebombed a black church in Jamaica, Queens. He'd terrorized families, destroyed property, and spread fear like it was his sacred duty. And he'd never spent a single night in jail. By early 1962, Chapter 47 had decided to expand their operations into Manhattan. They'd heard about CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, opening an office in Harlem to organize voter registration and fair housing campaigns. They'd read about the NAACP planning demonstrations against police brutality. They'd watched the civil rights movement gaining momentum and decided it needed to be stopped. "We need to send a message," Kozlowski told his men at a Thursday meeting in February. "These people need to understand that there are consequences for getting uppity. We need to show them that New York isn't the promised land they think it is." Tommy Brennan volunteered immediately. "I'll handle it. Give me 2 men and I'll make sure Harlem gets the message." What they decided on was terror, random, shocking violence that would create fear without an obvious target. They'd attack someone innocent, someone vulnerable, someone whose suffering would send a message that nobody was safe. They chose a schoolteacher named Sarah Mitchell. Sarah Mitchell was everything the Klan hated and feared: educated, confident, successful, and unapologetically black in a society that demanded she shrink herself to make white people comfortable. She was 24 years old, a graduate of Hunter College with a degree in elementary education. She taught 3rd grade at PS 125 in Harlem, where she was beloved by students and parents alike for her warmth, creativity, and genuine investment in her students' futures. She lived in a modest apartment on West 142nd Street with her husband, Robert, a postal worker who'd served in the Korean War and come home determined to build a life that honored the freedom he'd fought to defend. In March 1962, Sarah was 7 months pregnant with their first child. She glowed with the kind of happiness that made strangers smile when she walked by. She decorated the nursery in soft yellows and greens, neutral colors because they wanted to be surprised. She'd read every book about childbirth and parenting she could find. She talked to her students about becoming a big sister or big brother to her baby, making them part of her journey. She had no enemies. She'd never hurt anyone. She simply existed as a black woman who refused to be diminished, who walked through the world with dignity and joy, who believed, naively perhaps, that her education and character would protect her. The Klan targeted her because she represented everything they wanted to destroy: black achievement, black families, black futures. They didn't know her personally. They didn't need to. She was a symbol, and symbols could be destroyed to send a message. What they didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a schoolteacher. She wasn't just a pregnant woman. She was connected to a network of people who would move heaven and earth to protect her. Her husband Robert had served in Korea with a man named Marcus Washington. Marcus had saved Robert's life during the Battle of Heartbreak Ridge, carrying him 3 miles through enemy fire after Robert took shrapnel to his leg. They'd been brothers ever since, the kind of bond that transcends friendship and becomes family. Marcus Washington worked for Bumpy Johnson. He was a numbers runner, one of the most reliable men in Bumpy's organization, trusted with thousands of dollars in collections every week. He was smart, disciplined, and absolutely loyal. And Robert Mitchell was his brother in every way that mattered. When Marcus introduced Robert to Sarah in 1959, he'd stood as best man at their wedding in 1960. When Sarah got pregnant in 1961, Marcus and his wife threw her baby shower. When the baby was born, Marcus would be the godfather. The Klan didn't know any of this when they chose Sarah Mitchell as their target. They didn't know that attacking her would bring them face to face with the most powerful man in Harlem. They didn't know that they were about to start a war they couldn't win. On the evening of March 15th, 1962, Sarah Mitchell left PS 125 at 4:30 p.m., carrying a bag of student essays she planned to grade that evening. It was a Thursday, Tommy Brennan's meeting night, though Sarah had no idea such meetings existed or that she'd been discussed at one. She walked toward the subway station at 145th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, the same route she took every day, thinking about dinner and whether she'd have time to finish the baby blanket she was crocheting. She had no idea that 3 men in a Ford sedan had been following her for 2 blocks. She had no idea that Tommy Brennan sat in the passenger seat with a baseball bat across his lap, waiting for the right moment. She had no idea that in exactly 4 minutes, her life would change forever, and that change would trigger a chain of events that would dismantle an entire Klan chapter and make them pay a price so devastating that it would echo through hate organizations for decades. Little did Tommy Brennan know that attacking Sarah Mitchell would be the biggest mistake of his life. What seemed like an easy target was actually a tripwire connected to forces he couldn't comprehend. Because Bumpy Johnson always protected his people. And Sarah Mitchell, through Marcus Washington, through Robert Mitchell, through the web of connection that made Harlem a family, was his people. The car pulled up beside her at the corner of 143rd and St. Nicholas. Tommy Brennan stepped out with his baseball bat, and the countdown to his destruction began. It started when Sarah Mitchell smiled at a child across the street. She was standing at the corner of 143rd and St. Nicholas Avenue, waiting for the light to change, when she saw a little girl, maybe 5 years old, walking with her mother. The child was staring at Sarah's pregnant belly with wide, curious eyes. Sarah winked at her and patted her stomach, mouthing, "Baby." The little girl's face lit up with delight. That moment of pure, innocent connection was the last peaceful moment Sarah would have for a very long time. The Ford sedan pulled up to the curb so quickly that Sarah didn't register it as a threat until the passenger door flew open. Tommy Brennan stepped out, baseball bat in hand, his face twisted with a hatred so visceral it seemed to radiate from his pores. "This is for thinking you belong here," he snarled. Sarah's mind couldn't process what was happening fast enough to react. She saw the bat rising. She instinctively turned to protect her belly, raising her arms to shield herself. The bat came down on her shoulder with a crack that echoed off the brownstone buildings. She fell hard, landing on her side on the concrete, her arms still wrapped around her stomach, trying desperately to protect the baby. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Pain exploded through her shoulder, her hip, her ribs. Tommy Brennan stood over her, raising the bat for another strike, when something stopped him. Not conscience, not humanity, but the sound of people running, shouting, witnesses flooding out of nearby buildings. "Get in the car," someone yelled from the Ford. Brennan delivered one more kick to Sarah's back, a coward's parting shot, before jumping into the sedan. The car screeched away from the curb, running the red light, disappearing into traffic. Sarah lay on the sidewalk, conscious but unable to move, pain radiating through her body, her only thought a desperate prayer. Please let the baby be okay. Please let my baby be okay. The woman with the little girl reached her first, kneeling beside her, pulling off her own coat to cushion Sarah's head. Don't move, honey. Someone called an ambulance. Just stay still. Others gathered around, creating a protective circle. Someone recognized her. That's Mrs. Mitchell from PS 125. Another person ran to find her husband Robert at their apartment 3 blocks away. By the time the ambulance arrived 7 minutes later, a crowd of 40 people had gathered. They'd seen the attack. They'd seen a white man with a baseball bat strike down a pregnant black woman for no reason except hatred. They'd seen him flee like the coward he was. And they were angry, not the hot, explosive anger that burns out quickly, but the cold, sustained fury that demands justice and won't rest until it's delivered. What Tommy Brennan didn't know was that among the witnesses was Marcus Washington's cousin, Angela, who'd been visiting a friend on that block. She'd seen everything. And the moment Sarah was loaded into the ambulance, Angela ran to the nearest payphone and made a call that would change everything. Marcus, it's Angela. Something terrible just happened. It's Sarah. She's been attacked. White men with a baseball bat. She's pregnant, Marcus. They hit a pregnant woman. Marcus Washington's blood ran cold. Where is she? Ambulance just took her to Harlem Hospital. Marcus, they tried to kill her. They tried to kill Sarah and the baby. Marcus hung up the phone and stood very still for 10 seconds, his mind racing through the implications, the connections, the protocol he'd learned working for Bumpy Johnson. Then he made 2 calls. The first was to Robert Mitchell, reaching him just as neighbors were banging on his door to tell him his wife had been hurt. The second call was to a number he'd been told to use only in emergencies, a number that connected directly to Bumpy Johnson. Mr. Johnson, this is Marcus Washington. I need to see you immediately. It's about my sister-in-law. She's been attacked. She's 7 months pregnant. Bumpy's response was immediate and calm. Where are you? About to head to Harlem Hospital. Go. Take care of your family. I'll meet you there in 30 minutes. And Marcus? Yes, sir? Tell me everything you know, every detail. Who saw what, when, and where. Understand? Yes, sir. This won't stand, Marcus. Whatever happened, whoever did this, it won't stand. Bumpy Johnson arrived at Harlem Hospital at 5:47 p.m., less than an hour after the attack. He found Marcus Washington in the waiting room outside the maternity ward, along with Robert Mitchell, who sat with his head in his hands, still wearing his postal uniform, his whole body shaking with fear and rage. Bumpy sat down beside them, his presence immediately commanding attention from everyone in the waiting room. He didn't speak at first, just waited, giving them space to process, to breathe, to gather themselves. Finally, Robert looked up. His eyes were red, his voice barely above a whisper. They beat her, Mr. Johnson. Pregnant woman minding her business, walking home from teaching children, and they beat her with a baseball bat because she's black. What kind of animals do that? The kind that don't understand consequences yet, Bumpy said quietly. Tell me what happened. Everything. Between Marcus and Robert, the story emerged. The Ford sedan, the white man with the bat, the witnesses, Angela's account, the details that painted a picture of calculated hate crime, not random violence. "Did anyone get a license plate?" Bumpy asked. Marcus nodded. 3 different people wrote it down. "I have it." He handed Bumpy a piece of paper with New York, GH4782, written on it. Bumpy studied the number, committing it to memory. "What about descriptions?" "White male, late 30s, brown hair, wearing work clothes. 2 other men in the car, but they never got out. Ford sedan, dark blue or black, maybe 59 or 60. At that moment, a doctor emerged from the maternity ward. Everyone stood up at once. "Mr. Mitchell?" The doctor looked at Robert. "Your wife is stable. The baby's heartbeat is strong, but she suffered significant trauma. Fractured shoulder, bruised ribs, possible internal bleeding. We're monitoring her closely. The next 48 hours are critical." "Can I see her?" "Yes, but she's sedated. She won't be able to talk much." After Robert disappeared into the maternity ward, Bumpy turned to Marcus. "I need you to do something for me. I need you to find everyone who witnessed this attack. Get their names, their addresses, their phone numbers. I need written statements from everyone who saw what happened." "Can you do that?" "Yes, sir. Already started. Angela's coordinating with the neighbors." "Good." Bumpy stood up. "This wasn't random, Marcus. This was organized. White men driving from outside Harlem to attack a pregnant black woman? This has the smell of something bigger, something organized." "You think it's the Klan?" Bumpy's expression hardened. "I know it's the Klan, and I know exactly how we're going to handle it." He walked to the payphone in the hospital corridor and made 3 calls. The first was to his lawyer, David Rothstein, the same attorney who'd handled the Castellano case. "David, I need you at Harlem Hospital tonight. Civil rights violation, hate crime, assault on a pregnant woman. We're building a case that's going to make history." The second call was to a private investigator named Samuel Brooks, a former NYPD detective who'd left the force after refusing to participate in corruption and now worked exclusively for clients who could afford the truth. "Sam, I need you to trace a license plate. GH4782, New York. I need to know who owns that car, where they live, where they work, and everyone they associate with. Money is no object. I need this yesterday." The third call was to a contact in the FBI's New York field office, a black agent named Charles Morrison, who'd been one of the first African Americans hired by the Bureau, and who maintained a quiet relationship with Bumpy based on mutual respect and shared goals. "Charles, it's Ellsworth. I need information on KKK activity in New York, specifically Queens and Brooklyn. Active cells, known members, recent activities, and I need it fast." By 8 p.m. that evening, Bumpy was sitting in the hospital cafeteria with David Rothstein, reviewing a plan that would make legal history. "We're not just suing the attackers," Rothstein explained, his eyes gleaming with the kind of intellectual excitement lawyers get when they see a truly groundbreaking case. "We're going after the entire organization. Under the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, yes, it still exists, we can hold the KKK itself liable for the actions of its members. We prove this was organized hate crime activity. We can sue the local chapter, the national organization, and every individual member for conspiracy to violate civil rights." "What kind of damages are we talking about?" "Compensatory damages for medical expenses, pain and suffering, emotional distress, loss of income, easily 2 to 3 million for Sarah and her family. But the real power is in punitive damages. We make an example that terrorizing black citizens will cost them everything they have. We're talking 10, 15, maybe 20 million total. Enough to bankrupt their organization and send a message that hate has a price tag they can't afford. Bumpy leaned back in his chair. In this life, David, you have two choices when someone attacks the innocent. You can seek revenge, or you can seek justice. Revenge feels good for a moment. Justice changes the world. We're going for justice. It won't be easy. The Klan operates in secret. They compartmentalize. They'll deny everything. That's why we're going to expose them. Every member, every meeting place, every act of terror they've committed. We're going to pull them out of the shadows and into the light where everyone can see what they really are. Rothstein smiled. You know, when I went to law school, they taught us that the law was about precedent, procedure, and patience. But working with you, I've learned it's about something else entirely. What's that? Power, and knowing how to use it for something bigger than yourself. While Sarah Mitchell lay in a hospital bed fighting for her baby's life, while her husband sat beside her holding her uninjured hand and praying, while Harlem simmered with rage over another act of racial violence, Tommy Brennan went home to Queens feeling invincible. He'd left the hospital having accomplished exactly what he wanted. He'd terrorized a black woman, sent a message to Harlem, and escaped without consequence. The Ford sedan had been ditched in a parking lot in Brooklyn, wiped clean of prints. The baseball bat had been thrown into the East River. He'd showered, changed clothes, and was eating dinner with his family by 7 p.m. His wife asked him how his civic association meeting went. "Productive," he said, cutting into his pork chop. "Real productive." At Thursday's Klan meeting the following week, Tommy received congratulations from Walter Kozlowski and the other members. They'd read about the attack in the newspapers. Pregnant teacher assaulted in Harlem, suspects unknown, and felt proud of their work. "This is exactly the kind of action we need," Kozlowski told the group. "Random, terrifying, impossible to trace back to us. The coloreds in Harlem now know that they're not safe, that their so-called community leaders can't protect them, that we can strike anywhere, anytime." The men nodded, energized by what they saw as a successful operation. They began planning their next attack, discussing targets, debating between another assault, or perhaps a firebombing. What they didn't know was that their meeting space, a warehouse owned by Kozlowski's plumbing supply company, was being photographed from across the street by Samuel Brooks, Bumpy's private investigator. Brooks had been sitting in a panel van with a telephoto lens for 3 nights, documenting every person who entered and exited, capturing license plates, building a comprehensive record of Chapter 47's membership. While Brennan celebrated his attack, Private Investigator Brooks traced the Ford sedan to a rental company in Queens. The car had been rented under a false name, but the rental agreement required a driver's license, and the fake ID had been sloppy enough that Brooks could identify the real person. A man named Dennis Murphy, a Con Edison employee and known associate of Thomas Brennan. While Kozlowski planned future attacks, FBI agent Charles Morrison was pulling files on known Klan activity in New York. He couldn't officially share the information. Bureau policy prohibited cooperation with civilians, but he could have a conversation over drinks with an old acquaintance, and if certain files happened to be visible on the table, and if that acquaintance happened to have an excellent memory, well, that was just coincidence. The files revealed that the FBI had been monitoring Chapter 47 for 18 months, but hadn't moved against them because they were waiting to build a federal case. They had informants, surveillance reports, and evidence of at least 23 separate criminal acts. They knew the members' names, addresses, and occupations. They just hadn't acted yet because the Bureau's priorities in 1962 were focused on communist infiltration, not domestic terrorism against black citizens. But that was about to change. By the end of March, Bumpy had assembled a complete picture of Chapter 47. 23 members, including Tommy Brennan, Walter Kozlowski, and Dennis Murphy, 6 police officers, 4 firefighters, 3 Con Edison employees, 2 union officials. The rest were small business owners, tradesmen, and middle managers. They met every Thursday at 8 p.m. in Kozlowski's warehouse. They'd committed at least 23 documented crimes over 3 years, and they'd never faced consequences because they had protection within law enforcement, but they didn't have protection from Bumpy Johnson. On April 3, 1962, Sarah Mitchell was released from the hospital. The baby had survived. Sarah's injuries would heal, but the trauma ran deeper than broken bones and bruised ribs. She was terrified to leave her apartment. She couldn't sleep without nightmares of the baseball bat coming down again. She jumped at sudden movements. She couldn't walk past the corner where it happened without having a panic attack. Robert took a leave of absence from the post office to care for her. Marcus and his wife visited daily, bringing food, offering support, sitting with Sarah while Robert tried to sleep. It was during one of these visits that Bumpy Johnson came to see Sarah personally. He knocked quietly, hat in hand, his usual commanding presence softened by genuine respect and concern. Sarah was sitting on the couch, her arm in a sling, her face still showing fading bruises. "Mrs. Mitchell, my name is Ellsworth Johnson. I'm a friend of Marcus and Robert. I wanted to check on you personally and tell you what we're doing to make sure this never happens again." Sarah looked at this legendary figure standing in her modest living room, and something about his calm certainty made her feel safe for the first time since the attack. "Mr. Johnson, I appreciate you coming, but I don't want revenge. I don't want more violence. I just want to feel safe again." Bumpy sat down in the chair across from her, taking his time, his movements deliberate and respectful. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm not here to offer revenge. I'm here to offer justice. There's a difference. Revenge is striking back in anger. Justice is making sure that the people who hurt you face consequences so severe that nobody else will dare do what they did. Justice protects the next person, the next family, the next community." How? We're building a legal case against the Ku Klux Klan. Not just the men who attacked you, but their entire organization. We're going to sue them for everything they have and everything they'll ever have. We're going to expose them publicly, destroy their anonymity, end their ability to terrorize people, and we're going to make them pay, financially, professionally, and personally, for what they did to you and for every act of terror they've committed. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Can that really work? It can. It will. Because we have the evidence, we have the witnesses, and we have something they don't have: the truth. The truth doesn't need to hide in the shadows. The truth can stand in the light of day and be examined by judges and juries. And when people see the truth about what these men are, they'll turn away in disgust. Bumpy reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder. This is a civil lawsuit prepared by one of the best attorneys in New York. It names the men who attacked you and the organization that trained them, funded them, and protected them. The damages we're seeking are $17.5 million. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. 17 million? 500,000 for each of the 23 documented crimes they've committed. $2 million specifically for you, for your medical expenses, your pain and suffering, your baby's trauma, your loss of sense of security, and $3 million in punitive damages to send a message that hate is expensive. Robert, who'd been standing in the kitchen doorway listening, stepped forward. "Mr. Johnson, that kind of money would destroy them." "Yes," Bumpy said simply. "That's the point. You can't fight hate with hate, but you can fight it with consequences. You can make the price of hatred so high that ordinary people, the kind of people who join the Klan because they're angry or scared or ignorant, decide it's not worth it. You can bankrupt their organization so thoroughly that it can't function anymore. You can expose their members so completely that they lose their jobs, their reputations, their ability to operate." He stood up, preparing to leave. "I'm going to tell you something once, Mrs. Mitchell, so I hope you'll hear me. What happened to you was evil. But evil doesn't win by being strong. It wins by making good people too afraid to fight back. We're going to fight back. Not with violence, but with something more powerful, the law, used the way it was meant to be used, to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. What do you need from me? Your testimony, your willingness to stand up in court and tell your story, your courage to face the men who hurt you and look them in the eye while a judge makes them pay for what they did." Sarah looked at her husband, then at Marcus, then back at Bumpy. She touched her belly where her baby was growing, still alive despite everything. "I'll do it," she said quietly, "not for revenge, for justice. So my baby grows up in a world where people can't get away with this anymore." Bumpy nodded with deep respect. "Then we have everything we need." It was 9:23 a.m. on Monday, April 16th, 1962, when Tommy Brennan's world began to collapse. He was sitting at his desk at Con Edison's Queens facility, reviewing electrical grid maintenance schedules, drinking his third cup of coffee, and thinking about nothing more consequential than whether to get a sandwich or a burger for lunch. Outside his office window, the morning sun cut through spring clouds, and the world seemed normal, predictable, safe. That's when he saw them coming. 2 process servers walked through the main office floor, flanked by a security guard heading directly toward him. Behind them, visible through the glass windows, were 3 news reporters with cameras. And behind them, calm and unhurried, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and a fedora, was Bumpy Johnson. In that moment, Tommy Brennan realized he had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The process servers reached his desk. One of them spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone in the office to hear. "Thomas Michael Brennan?" "Yeah, what's this about?" "You've been served." The papers landed on his desk with a sound like thunder. "Civil lawsuit for conspiracy to violate civil rights, assault, battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and participation in a pattern of racketeering activity. You're being sued for $17.5 million. The office went silent. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped. Tommy's hands shook as he picked up the lawsuit. The first page listed him as defendant number 1, but there were 22 other defendants, every member of Chapter 47, including Walter Kozlowski. And the plaintiff was Sarah Mitchell, represented by attorney David Rothstein. "This is bullshit," Tommy said, but his voice cracked. "I don't know what you're talking about." The second process server smiled. "Page 12 lists 14 witnesses who identified you as the primary attacker in the assault on Mrs. Mitchell on March 15th. Page 18 has photographs of you entering and exiting Kozlowski's warehouse on 7 different Thursday nights. Page 24 has testimony from a confidential informant detailing your involvement in 23 separate criminal acts since 1959. Tommy looked up at the reporters, their cameras already rolling, and then passed them to Bumpy Johnson, who stood watching with the patient stillness of a chess master who'd already won the game and was simply waiting for his opponent to realize it. "Who the hell are you?" Tommy asked, though some part of him already knew. Bumpy walked slowly into the office, his presence commanding attention from everyone present. He stopped in front of Tommy's desk and spoke in a voice that was calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "My name is Ellsworth Johnson. You attacked a member of my community, a pregnant woman who'd never done anything to hurt anyone. You thought you could spread terror in Harlem and face no consequences. You were wrong." "I don't know what you're talking about. I want a lawyer." "Good idea. You're going to need one." Bumpy placed a folder on the desk. "This is a copy of everything we have on you and your organization. Every crime, every meeting, every member. We've given copies to the FBI, the New York Police Department Internal Affairs, and the District Attorney's Office. Your criminal prosecution starts next week. This civil lawsuit is just the beginning." Tommy's face went white. "You can't prove anything." "We have 14 witnesses to your attack on Mrs. Mitchell. We have photographs of your Klan meetings. We have testimony from people you've terrorized. We have financial records showing how your organization funds itself. We have everything, Mr. Brennan. And by Friday, everyone else will too." Bumpy turned to leave, then paused. "In this life, you have two choices. You can hide behind sheets and hoods and pretend you're powerful. Or you can face the light of day and see what you really are, a coward who attacks pregnant women. You chose the first option. I'm making sure you experience the second." What happened next took exactly 72 hours. By Tuesday afternoon, all 23 members of Chapter 47 had been served with the lawsuit. By Tuesday evening, the story was on the front page of every New York newspaper. KKK chapter sued for $17. 5mm in attack on pregnant teacher. Entire organization named in unprecedented civil rights case. By Wednesday morning, the FBI announced a federal investigation into the Ku Klux Klan's activities in New York, citing credible evidence of a conspiracy to violate the civil rights of minority citizens. The investigation would be led by Agent Charles Morrison, who'd been waiting years for authorization to move against domestic terrorists. By Wednesday afternoon, 6 of the defendants had lost their jobs, including all the Con Edison employees, the union officials, and 2 of the police officers. Their employers, facing public outrage and potential liability, had terminated them immediately. By Thursday morning, Walter Kozlowski's plumbing supply company lost its 3 largest contracts. His bank called his business loan. His insurance company canceled his policies. His warehouse, the meeting place for Chapter 47, was raided by the FBI, who seized documents, membership lists, and evidence of criminal conspiracy. By Thursday afternoon, 17 of the 23 defendants had hired lawyers. Those lawyers, after reviewing the evidence, all gave the same advice: settle immediately, cooperate fully, and pray the criminal charges don't destroy you completely. By Friday morning, Tommy Brennan sat in his living room in Queens, unemployed, facing criminal charges, watching his wife pack suitcases to take their children to her mother's house in Pennsylvania. "I didn't know it would come to this," he said weakly. "I was just trying to protect our way of life." His wife turned on him with a fury he'd never seen before. "Our way of life? You beat a pregnant woman with a baseball bat, Tommy. What kind of life is that? What kind of man does that? She was, don't you dare finish that sentence. Don't you dare try to justify attacking an innocent woman because of the color of her skin. I'm taking the kids away from this. Away from you. Away from the shame of what you've become. After she left, Tommy sat alone in the silence, looking at the civil lawsuit on his coffee table, and understood for the first time that he'd destroyed everything. Not by fighting for something, but by giving in to hate. The settlement negotiations began in late April and concluded in early June. David Rothstein sat across from 23 defense attorneys in a conference room at the New York County Courthouse. The defendants weren't present. Their lawyers had advised them to stay away to avoid media attention. But their futures hung in the balance of what was decided in that room. Rothstein laid out the terms with surgical precision. My clients are willing to accept a structured settlement under the following conditions. Full payment of $17.5 million, distributed as follows. $2 million to Sarah Mitchell for medical expenses, pain and suffering, and emotional distress. $500,000 to each of the 11 other documented victims of your client's terrorist activities, totaling $5.5 million. The remaining $10 million to be placed in a civil rights legal defense fund to protect minority communities from hate crimes throughout New York. One of the defense attorneys, a senior partner from a white shoe firm representing Walter Kozlowski, spoke up. Our clients don't have that kind of money. This would bankrupt all of them. Yes, Rothstein said simply. That's the point. Your clients formed a criminal conspiracy to terrorize innocent people. They beat a pregnant woman. They burned crosses. They firebombed churches. They've operated with impunity for years. The price for that impunity is everything they have. We'll fight this in court. Please do. Rothstein opened a folder filled with photographs, witness statements, and documentary evidence. We'll put every victim on the stand. We'll show the jury photographs of Mrs. Mitchell's injuries, of burned churches, of families traumatized by your client's terrorism. We'll parade your client's cowardice in front of the entire nation. And when we win, and we will win, the judgment will be even higher because juries tend to punish hate crimes severely. So yes, please, take this to trial. My clients are ready. The defense attorneys exchanged glances. They knew Rothstein was right. A jury looking at a pregnant woman with a fractured shoulder versus Klan members in hoods wouldn't hesitate. What about criminal charges? Another attorney asked. Those are separate from this civil action. However, I've been informed by the district attorney that defendants who cooperate fully with the civil settlement and renounce their affiliation with hate groups will receive favorable consideration in plea negotiations. Those who fight will face the full weight of federal and state criminal prosecution. The message was clear. Settle and maybe avoid prison, or fight and lose everything, including your freedom. By the end of June, all 23 defendants had agreed to the settlement terms. Tommy Brennan sold his house in Queens to pay his share. The equity barely covered $200,000 of his portion. He'd have to work for the rest of his life to pay off the remainder, assuming he could find employment with a criminal record and a reputation as a Klan terrorist. Walter Kozlowski filed for bankruptcy. His plumbing supply company was liquidated. His personal assets were seized. He lost his home, his cars, his savings. He moved to a small apartment in New Jersey and took a job as a maintenance worker, the kind of labor he used to supervise. The 6 police officers and firefighters lost their jobs, their pensions, and any chance of working in law enforcement again. Several faced criminal charges for using their positions to protect Klan activities. Chapter 47 of the Knights of the Ku Klux Klan ceased to exist. The national organization, facing unprecedented legal exposure and public scrutiny, formally disbanded all New York chapters and withdrew from the state entirely. The $17.5 million was paid in installments over 3 years, every penny accounted for and distributed as promised. Sarah Mitchell received her $2 million in August 1962. She used it to buy a beautiful home in St. Albans, Queens, a neighborhood where middle-class black families had built a community of dignity and achievement. She established a scholarship fund for young black teachers. She donated to civil rights organizations. And she continued teaching, because despite the trauma, she believed in the power of education to change the world. On September 12, 1962, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She and Robert named him Marcus, after the man whose loyalty to Bumpy Johnson had ultimately saved her life and changed history. The case of Mitchell versus Brennan et al. Became landmark legal precedent. It was the first successful large-scale civil lawsuit against the Ku Klux Klan under the 1871 Civil Rights Act. Legal scholars studied it. Civil rights attorneys used it as a template. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund cited it in dozens of subsequent cases. Most importantly, it demonstrated that hate organizations could be fought not just with moral arguments, but with financial devastation. You could bankrupt bigotry. You could make terrorism too expensive to afford. The Harlem Civil Rights Legal Defense Fund, established with the $10 million from the settlement, operated for 40 years, helping hundreds of families fight discrimination, displacement, and hate crimes. It funded legal battles against police brutality, housing discrimination, and employment bias. It trained a generation of civil rights attorneys who carried forward the lesson that the law, used strategically and aggressively, could be a weapon for justice. Tommy Brennan spent the rest of his life paying his debt. He worked as a janitor, a security guard, a night shift clerk at convenience stores. Whatever jobs would hire a man with his record. Every paycheck was garnished. Every year on March 15th, the anniversary of his attack on Sarah Mitchell, he received a statement showing how much he still owed and how much had been paid to his victims. He never wore a hood again. He never attended another Klan meeting. Some say he found redemption in his suffering, that he died in 1994 as a different man than he'd been in 1962. Others say he simply learned to hide his hatred better. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Redemption is possible, but it's not guaranteed. What's guaranteed is consequences. Walter Kozlowski died in 1979, still in debt from the settlement, still working menial jobs to pay for crimes committed decades earlier. On his deathbed, he reportedly told his son, "I thought I was protecting something. I was just destroying it, including myself." Fire Marshal Morrison, who'd provided crucial evidence for the case, became a consultant to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, helping to build cases against hate organizations across the country. He worked until retirement in 1987, his career a testament to the idea that one person's courage to do the right thing can change countless lives. David Rothstein went on to become one of the nation's leading civil rights attorneys, arguing cases before the Supreme Court, training young lawyers, and using the law as an instrument of social change. He always said that the Mitchell case taught him the most important lesson of his career. The law isn't neutral, it's a tool. The question isn't whether it's powerful, it's who gets to use that power, and for what purpose. Marcus Washington continued working with Bumpy Johnson until Bumpy's death in 1968. He later became a community organizer, using the connections and lessons he'd learned to protect Harlem families from exploitation. He was godfather to Sarah's son Marcus, watching him grow up to become a civil rights attorney himself, carrying forward the legacy of justice. As for Bumpy Johnson, he never spoke publicly about the case. When reporters asked him about his role, he simply said, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a businessman." But everyone in Harlem knew. They knew that when the system failed, when the police wouldn't protect, when the courts moved too slowly, there was someone who would act. Someone who understood that justice sometimes required power, and power required strategy, and strategy required patience. The story became legend. The time Bumpy Johnson took on the Ku Klux Klan and won not with violence, but with something more devastating, complete financial and social destruction. The time he made hate so expensive that even true believers couldn't afford to practice it. And 62 years later, when civil rights attorneys teach young lawyers about using the law as a tool for social justice, they still reference Mitchell v. Brennan. They still talk about $17.5 million in damages. They still tell the story of how one pregnant teacher's trauma became the catalyst for dismantling a terrorist organization. They tell the story of how Bumpy Johnson proved that the most powerful weapon against hate isn't matching violence with violence. It's making the cost of hatred exceed the value of everything the haters possess. In the end, what Tommy Brennan and the Ku Klux Klan learned was something that every person who trades in hate eventually discovers. Consequences are real. You can hide behind hoods and secret meetings. You can operate in shadows and think you're untouchable, but eventually the light finds you. Eventually, someone with more power, more strategy, and more commitment to justice will make you pay for every moment of pain you inflicted. Bumpy Johnson understood something that transcended street justice. That real power isn't about instilling fear, it's about protecting the fearful. That real leadership isn't about revenge, it's about creating consequences so severe that future predators think twice before attacking the innocent. That $17.5 million wasn't just punishment, it was prevention, it was protection. It was a price tag on hatred that made hatred too expensive for ordinary cowards to afford. Sarah Mitchell didn't just survive that attack. She thrived. She raised her son, continued teaching, used her settlement to create opportunities for others, and lived to see a world where the kind of open terrorism that nearly killed her became increasingly rare. Not because people became better overnight, but because the cost of being worse became too high. What would you have done if you were Tommy Brennan? Would you have taken the settlement and tried to rebuild as a different person? Would you have fled to another state? Or would you have fought the lawsuit and lost everything, including your freedom? And what would you have done if you were Bumpy Johnson? Would you have sought street justice, responding to violence with violence? Or would you have understood, like he did, that the most devastating response to terrorism is systematic dismantling, making hate economically, socially, and legally impossible to sustain? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know, was $17.5 million enough? Too much? Or exactly the right price for attacking a pregnant woman? If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now. We're bringing you the Bumpy Johnson stories that changed history. The moments when street wisdom met legal strategy. When community protection meant financial warfare. When justice came not from badges, but from a man who understood that consequences are the only language that power truly respects. Smash that like button if you believe Bumpy Johnson was more than a crime boss. He was Harlem's shield, its sword of justice, its reminder that nobody, not the Klan, not corrupt developers, not crooked politicians, could terrorize his community without paying a price that would echo through generations. Tomorrow's story. What happened when a corrupt landlord tried to evict 70 war widows in the middle of winter? How Bumpy Johnson didn't just stop the evictions, he made the landlord pay for housing every widow in Harlem for the next 20 years. You don't want to miss it. Until then, remember, hate is expensive. Justice is priceless. And in Harlem, Bumpy Johnson made sure the bills always came due. See you tomorrow.